Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Sarah Cowgill, Andrew Moran, Jeff Charles, and Scott Cosenza. And this is the Conservative Five, Liberty Nation's online TV news program. The Chinese Communist Party regime does not embrace the concept of free speech. No, they govern by suppression. So it's a rare occasion when citizens take to the streets in protest and demand their president, Xi Jinping, take a hike. Well, folks, it seems like the Chinese may be suffering from trouble of their own making, COVID. Xi's draconian COVID policies have people hopping mad. So, Sarah, Chinese COVID policies are very different from what we experience here in the U.S. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Well, I'd like to be able to tell you with full frankness and honesty what's going on over there, but I don't think they're going to let us know. Neighborhoods are locked down. So say you live on 5th Street and you want to go across the main drag to, Willow neighborhood, you're not going to get there. That they're just locked down. There are buildings that are locked down. There's daily testing, daily COVID testing, and they're forcing vaccinations like crazy. It's very restrictive. I mean, you think California was bad or Wisconsin or Michigan. This is bad. If this is in fact what is going on over there, and we don't really have free press. We're just depending on social media people at this point.
Jeff, you're pretty dialed into Twitter. I guess that's an understatement. So what have you been hearing and seeing coming out of China?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I was actually surprised that these protests happen. I mean, this is China that we're talking about, not the United States. And you're not allowed to speak out against the government like that. But these people took to the streets anyway to protest, knowing that their government would very much likely oppress them for doing so. But what I thought was interesting is that according to a report that I read earlier today, it might be working. I mean, the Chinese people do not get free speech, but they use their speech anyway. Like in the city of Guangzhou, people are starting to return to work. In Chongqing, they're not even being required to take at least regular COVID tests. So it's interesting to me that the Chinese government didn't crack down like they normally would. Now, that could always change, right? I mean, we never know what the CCP is going to do. But what I'm seeing is that these protests, at least for right now, they're kind of working.
Well, it's interesting, Andrew, because I'm writing a story on Apple's complicity with the Communist Party, the CCP, because what they did was CCP said, you got to get rid of AirDrop, which is the app on Apple that allows you to talk to, like I can talk to Scott or I can talk to Sarah without the internet or without a cell tower. So, it's a great way to organize a protest. Well, the CCP said, stop it. And Apple said, sure.
Well, just to clarify one moment, with the whole AirDrop app, that was actually they updated that system only for Chinese iPhones 3 weeks ago. So it was actually in the weeks leading up to the protests. One of the reasons why experts say that happened was because there was growing dissent over Xi Jinping being anointed to a third term. To piggyback on what Jeff was talking about in Guangzhou, Apple or Foxconn, which is the largest iPhone maker in China, they're raising wages, they're giving out bonuses because they're so desperate for people to come back to these factories. One of the reasons is that Apple, they're estimated to lose about $8 billion this year. In December, because there's going to be approximately 8 million fewer iPhone units being shipped to market because of the protests, because of lockdowns, because of the clashes. And overall, I mean, the Chinese economy, I'm surprised, Xi Jinping didn't loosen these COVID restrictions earlier because the economy has been devastated. Scott and I, we talked about this a few weeks ago, whereby the Chinese government actually suspended economic data for about 2 weeks because it was so bad. And now the data publishing is being resumed, and you're seeing these dreadful numbers. Manufacturing is weakening, imports have slumped, but overall, oil markets, they're signifying that they're optimistic that these COVID restrictions are going to be loosened. And one report came out from Bloomberg that said, people who are infected, they can stay home if they're low risk, as opposed to being shipped off to a government detention center.
Well, apparently, Scott, what started all this was a fire in an apartment building. All these people were on lockdown, and like 10 people, including some kids, died. So, I think that, upset the populace a little bit.
Yeah, this has gone beyond a protest about the COVID restrictions. Those people were welded into a building, as I understand it, and to Xi's power. To Andrew's point about him taking a third term, or really what is just a bid for a lifetime leadership until he decides to step down. And I'll be the one who holds it up, I guess. They call it the A4 protest. They're afraid to even write down symbols or messages of disapproval of the regime. So they're holding up just blank white pieces of paper to indicate their dissent with it. And you have to just celebrate it. And, I'll just say that Van Morrison had it right. He said, you can't stop us on the road to freedom. You can't stop us because our eyes can see. And that's the state of things in China.
Well, I think, Sarah, you were on to something earlier when you were talking about the fact that it's working. I mean, things are loosening up some. So, maybe this is just kind of the beginning of the protesting.
I don't think it's going to be the end. I think, once you get a taste of freedom and this, remember Tiananmen Square, all that blew up, and the publicity, the optics on that were amazing, and it's worldwide. And that affects how a leader interacts with the rest of the world. And in this case, if you lock a bunch of people up in a building and prohibit them from leaving and prohibit first responders to get in there and save them, and you've got protests breaking out in every major city, in some smaller places, mostly college towns, but that's where you get that. That's where the Vietnam protesters came from. They're the young idealistic people, and they're chanting freedom, and they to say, Xi, resign, step down, go away, take a hike. That's pretty crazy. And it really is not going to, I don't think it's going to lessen at this point. I think what they're doing is reaching out to the rest of the world. And that should be a message that, nobody should put up with this crap in China. Nobody.
Jeff, do you think this is kind of the beginning of the end for Xi and communism in China, or is that too optimistic?
I hate to say it, but that might be a little bit too optimistic. I mean, honestly, the fact that they even won this small victory is a huge step. And it's really sad to say that. It shouldn't take something like this. But the fact that they were even able to do this is a step in the right direction. Maybe we will live to see the day where China is more free. But this kind of is similar to what's happening in Iran, what's been happening over the past couple months. I mean, the soccer game just happened, and there's a lot going on in Iran where people are being killed and arrested for demonstrating, but they're still doing it, and the world is watching. So it kind of makes me wonder how much longer these authoritarian regimes will survive. I don't think it's close to being defeated yet, but if this continues, then it may only be a matter of time.
They're chipping away at them.
Yeah, Andrew, do you think that technology and things like Apple and Twitter and places like that, you think they're helping or they're hindering in the cry for freedom?
I think it's more helping because it's letting the world what's happening in China. But I think when we talk about technology, the real concern, and to mention your point earlier, Lisa, about loosening communism, is that the cat's out of the bag. You're already too far down the rabbit hole. You look at the Chinese digital yuan. You have the government monitoring every single transaction you do with having a CBDC. The government, you have social credit scores. So it's going to be if this leads to the elimination of COVID lockdowns, that's great. But it's not going to lead to more of peeling the layers of all this, highly advanced technological clampdowns in the public. That's not going to happen. I mean, too far. Technology has afforded Xi Jinping the opportunity to clamp down more of the population. So everyone's still going to be a victim of communism and the Xi regime.
That is a central bank digital currency that he's referring to.
Thank you, Scott.
For those playing at home. And it is staggering what they can do with that information. And I'm mindful that I heard you mention the Tiananmen Square protests, Sarah. They murdered all those students, all those young people. They threw them, if they were lucky, they threw them in gulags. But the rest of them, I was reading up on Tank Man, if you remember, the iconic image, and the speculation is that he was murdered by the regime.
Well, the difference here in this situation, all these years later, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but the difference is social media. People have access. and they have ways of undermining and figuring out how to get that information out. 100 years ago, you didn't see it, you didn't read about it for a week. It wasn't effective. But now it's instant, and that's not going over well in some of these genocidal.
But this is what troubles me about
places.
Apple. I mean, Apple is a U.S. company, based out of San Jose, California. And, whether they did the airdrop 3 weeks earlier or not, they certainly weren't going to restore it. I think they're complicit. I think they have blood on their hands. I really do.
They certainly are.
Look at Apple. Apple 70% of Apple's supply chain is situated in China. There was a great estimate recently, actually 2 great estimates. One of them was from Bloomberg Intelligence, and it said that because Apple's goal is to transition away from China, it would take 8 years for Apple to reduce at least 20% of its dependence on China. So of course that's why Apple's beholden to China, because they need them for their supply chain.
All right. Well, when the obedient begin chanting, "We want freedom," who knows what will happen next? We'll keep you posted, panel. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform, YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble. We're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. Thanks for tuning in. And remember, surf on over to libertynation.com. Special thanks to our fantastic editor and post coordinator, Frank Diorio, and our executive producer, Sarah Cowgill. I'm Lisa K. Donner, editor-in-chief. Thanks so much for joining us today. This has been a production of libertynation.com, where truth is making a comeback.